for a moment with my partner,
Arthur Laffer.
And I'm Nancy Tengler. We're going to be talking about insights that we find super interesting from a macro standpoint to a micro standpoint, and then the rest of the time we'll probably just be making fun of me, because that's how we spend every day at Laffer Jr Investments.
My favorite pastime.
So first and foremost, we're going to give you our 5 big ideas for the week past and the week to come. So if we can throw up a chart, Taylor, the first one. All right, I'm going to go without it. Here we go. So one of the things that you're hearing a lot of the pundits talk about is whether or not stocks can continue to outperform in an environment where interest rates are rising. And so even though the chart might be a little bit difficult to see, you can screenshot it and look at it later. But what you will see is that rates, rates peaked at about 4.7% on the 10-year earlier this year in the summer, and stock market corrected modestly, and then it took off again. We think that we are in a bull market. We're early years in a bull market, and we think interest rates are going to stay higher than most people think. And our bond team, led by Arthur, has actually been arguing that for some time. So as rates continue to rise, we think the 10-year could get to
in excess of 5% easily. Depends on really what happens sooner, not later, which we're going to talk about in our third segment.
About the election, yeah. But so don't let it scare you out of stocks. If you see the 10-year rise, just take it in stride. Listen to the companies, which is what we do every single day as they report, and we're thick into earnings season. Go ahead.
And the other thing I'd say is, when you look at deployment of capital, like the capital markets and how they price risk and how they price returns, if equities are expected to outperform over time, you would expect actually yields to rise as the real return on capital expectations rise. So basically debt has to compete with equity returns, and how it does that is yields rise. So it actually would make a lot of sense that the market's shrugging off higher interest rates right now and probably continue to do it because real expectation of returns on capital are expected to be higher in the future than today.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And you know what I forgot to tell everyone? We're live from Nashville. We're at the Standard together. Our guest is going to be coming in very shortly. But yes, we're streaming from Nashville. I don't know what's in this mug, but
it's not water. It's not water.
So the next chart shows you what happened in the 1990s. So we had productivity-driven growth. Our view is that we have that again, and this is the Fed funds rate. So we got Chairman Greenspan raised rates pretty vigorously in 1994, and then held off in 95. And I think that's part of what the market is reacting to. The Fed just cut rates 50 basis points. I don't really have any understanding of why they did that. I think it was aggressive. I think it was too much. And as you can see, Chairman Greenspan only cut twice in 1995, 25 basis points each. The Fed funds rate was above 5%. So you can have a 5% Fed funds rate, and it can coexist with robust equity returns, as we saw in the second half of the 90s. So we continue to think that's the story, productivity, and that is the next chart. I am going to let Arthur talk, by the way, but I just wanted to get some seriousness done before he starts making fun of me. But the next chart will show you the productivity growth that we are seeing. This is a chart from our friend Ed Yardeni, and you can see that productivity growth, which is the bar chart, has been pretty robust and is continuing to deliver, we think, non-inflationary economic growth. Arthur runs our dynamic inflation strategy, so I'm going to let him talk a little bit about productivity and how that impacts inflation.
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. I think the interesting thing about the Fed and cutting the rates, the first Fed funds cut was 50 basis points, but they took quite a bit of the market by surprise, which is interesting because what we're looking at is an economy that's performing pretty well across the board. And cutting rates, typically, the Fed's going to put into place because they think they've got to basically add some money to the system to keep the economy going. And yet we've got 4.1% unemployment. We've got earnings that are continue to surprise on the upside. The market's shrugged off higher rates, both on the short end and the long end of the curve. So the question is, why is the Fed cutting, adding liquidity? And you also get credit spreads across the entire spectrum of the fixed income market, and they're about the tightest they've almost ever been historically. Mm-hmm. And so the question is, if credit's easy and the rates are still, relatively speaking, high by some people's standards, the economy continues to shrug it off. It continues to actually perform very well. Why did the Fed start with a 50 basis point cut? And really interesting. We're going to talk about this in a minute, but we're going to talk about the 10-year, just yields in general. But it seems like they're kind of getting it wrong again, just like transitory. This Fed's not got a great track record on rate hikes, delayed rate hikes for now. Looks like rate cuts.
Yep. Recalibration, as the Fed chairman said about 8 times in his most recent press conference, is the new transitory. So stay tuned. But the bond market, and Eddie Ardeni was the one that coined the phrase bond vigilantes. As he said today, they're getting on their horses and getting ready to ride. So we'll see what happens. Yeah. And then I don't remember what the next chart is.
The question is, the question to Ed is, what side of which way are they facing on the horse?
Did I mention we're in Nashville? Oh, and this is the unit labor cost, which is, of course, a byproduct of productivity. So, when you get to a 4% unit labor cost level, that's problematic for the economy. We're at 0.3%. So there's plenty of room for this economy to continue to chug along. It looks like third quarter GDP is going to be about 3.4%. Now that's an after inflation number. So as inflation has come down, total GDP, nominal GDP, has slowed down some, as you would expect it to, but real GDP is still very attractive. And I think we're going to go to China.
And the last 2 revisions, by the way, were up 0.2% for first and second quarter. So third quarter, I think the Fed now GDP is, I think, tracking at Nancy's point about 3.4, 3.5, somewhere in that neighborhood. And then first and second quarter just revised up by 0.2%, which I think 1.6 and 3, right?
And that was due to consumer spending. So retail spending, which continues to be real spending, is still rising, which means after inflation, people are spending more money than they used to. And that's also good for the economy because the consumer is 2/3 of the economy.
Yeah.
So we need people to spend, and they are. So.
And Nancy helps us out with that. Usually I go to her shoes and purse.
New Fendi boots.
Her wheels. And we're not talking about cars.
Do you want to talk about China before we bring in our guest?
Yeah,
live from Nashville.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you. So I think the interesting thing is we've talked, we've heard a lot about how China has been this malaise. They were slow to recover from COVID. They had the lockdowns much longer, and they've done a couple of what people thought is targeted but very large approaches to try to fix a problem they have, which is their real estate market. Although the problem's a lot broader than that, but if you look at China's exposure to real estate versus the U.S., China, I think, at the peak of about 27 to 29% of their economy was basically levered to real estate, commercial and residential. Whereas I think the U.S. is typically like 15, 16, 17%. So quite a bit larger than the U.S., almost 2 times larger than the U.S., their exposure to real estate. But the real issue is that, and this is my issue with China, is that I believe this is a structural issue. Mm-hmm. And right now they're just trying to put lipstick on a pig, to use a Nashville term or Southern term. And they're trying to target stock prices. They're trying to talk about leverage. And the interesting thing is the reason it's structural, in my opinion, is because what we're doing is we're basically looking at a consumer that's tapped out. They have negative equity in their real estate. So you can lower interest rates as much as you want. You can't borrow if you're negative. You're upside down. Banks won't lend to you. They did a little bit more this time, Nancy, with regard to cutting actual rates of mortgages. So that if you're a current mortgage owner, they actually lowered your rate, but unfortunately, they're so far underwater, cutting the rates, you can't cut them enough.
Yeah.
And so China really hasn't taken the serious task of fixing the real estate problem. And the reason it's even worse than what I made you believe before is that the state and local governments in China are hugely levered to real estate as well. In fact, it's one of their primary sources of revenues. So the question is, now that their revenue source has collapsed, what are they going to do? They're going to raise taxes at just the wrong time.
Yep.
And kill the consumer even more.
So in Arthur's global strategy, we're out of China. I know there's a lot of people saying, I forget who it was recently, one of the hedgy guys said, buy everything in China.
Yeah.
We disagree wholeheartedly. And so just keep your powder dry. The U.S. is the best economy on the block, and it's because of our productivity and all the CapEx we've been spending on technology. So we're going to take a break, and we're going to bring in our special guest. I don't know if you can see this. He'll be here in just a moment, live from Nashville, Macro Micro Moment. All right, we're back with my buddy Scott Shellady. Thanks so much for joining us, Scott, live from Nashville, Macro Micro Moment. We thought I wanted to start with Scott just telling us a little bit about his background, how he got into this crazy business, why he's wearing that crazy jacket, and the shoes are amazing. I don't know if we can see those, but he's got cow shoes on. So maybe you could just give us a brief resume.
All right, well, born in the middle of this country, Des Moines, Iowa. My father was a Cargill guy, and so we moved around the Midwest when he moved around with Cargill. Landed in Chicago. He became a pretty big employee. He started Cargill Investor Services for Cargill.
Wow.
And took all of his extra shekels and bought a farm because he always thought that was going to be important someday. And slowly but surely, that farm turned into about 800 acres in Northwest Illinois. And then he got crazier and became a dairy farmer, which was even harder than just planting corn and soybeans. And so about, I don't know, somewhere in the mid-1970s, late 1970s, in order to get more attraction in the pits, he started wearing a black and white cow jacket. So he was the original cow guy. And
so you're Cow Guy Jr.
I am. And so when I got into the business in 1987, 88, he was wearing the black and white cow jacket. And I was lucky enough to get sent to London and blah, blah. But I came back from my first stint in London in around 2001, and that was right when my father was retiring. So I thought it'd be nice if I wore the game-worn jersey. And so I put it on. But about that time, you might remember that all of a sudden, a huge amount of international and New York money started coming in commodities, right? And I'm in the middle of the corn futures pit wearing this black and white Holstein jacket in homage to my father on our dairy farm, which was still working. And everybody wanted to talk to the guy in the cow jacket, right? And slowly but surely I got better at it. And so I was like I'm an accidental tourist. I didn't mean to be in broadcasting, but this is where I came from. So now, after the pits went all electronic and kind of made us all, and put us all out of work, there was probably 10,000 of us.
Wow.
I was able to reinvent myself in the media, which I always kind of had an inkling for because nobody really knows this, but I was an art major at the university.
Oh, wow.
And I played on the football team, which embarrassed my father to no degree. So when he flew out to watch us play UCLA, which means he was watching me do exactly what I'm doing right now because I never got on the field. He waited for me outside the locker room and said, the last time I remember any artist making any money, it was only after they were dead. So you're going to have to change your major, and I went into finance. So that's how I got into finance. But I've always really been interested in finance because I look at it from an artist point of view. I don't look at it from mainstream macro, all the people you see with the blue jacket, the white shirt, red tie guy, the guys you see on TV. Nothing wrong with CNBC, and so I thought, well, maybe if I can parlay my different point of view, wearing a cow jacket like my father, it would garner some attention. And lo and behold, here I sit. So
Scott has the top-rated live show on RFD TV, and it's called The Cow Guy Clothes, and it's amazing. If you can stream it or pick it up off his website, which was where we got these super cool mugs. And there are also really cool sweatshirts. I was going to wear it, but I was worried about my hair.
Well, we call it like ESPN for farmers or Fox
Yeah,
for
it's
farmers.
great.
It's fun. And,
He has great guests and he's a great host. And he's on Fox Business pretty frequently.
probably 2 to 3 times a week.
Yeah.
So
So
Laffers are farmers too.
yes, that's true.
That's
We just have 3 farms.
Yeah, well,
And my dad goes out and hugs them every day and talks to them. It's so embarrassing.
well, we have those too. We have walnuts and pines back, because I told you we're Dutch. I think we would get them free from the DNR when I was a kid. And my dad would order 4, like they came in bottles of 1,500.
Yeah.
So we would have 6,000 pine trees and walnut trees waiting for us, my brother and I, to plant. 5 paces of
You
pine.
didn't use a machine, you actually planted them?
We had to
Okay.
go.
Laffers don't plant our own trees.
We healed them all in with a 5-gallon bucket of water. It was horrible.
Oh my gosh.
It's going to be therapy later, but yeah.
Yeah.
No, thank you. Okay, well, so we want to talk to Scott a little bit about the deficit and interest rates. And so if we can throw up the first chart, that sounds wrong. Can we please put up the first chart?
Throw it up.
Live from Nashville. I'm supposed to say that every few
Okay.
minutes. Yeah.
Live to the stand.
The standard in Nashville, yes. So this is the net interest cost versus weighted average cost of marketable debt. And what you can see is the red line has skyrocketed. I can't read that to 17.5% of total debt. No, I'm sorry. I'm not sure what this chart is. There we go. That's it. So this shows the outstanding debt, and look at how much we financed at the short end. It's like 34% of total marketable U.S. government debt is
That's 35 trillion, right?
yeah, and it's maturing within 0 to 1 year, which means the weighted average cost on the debt is now 3.3, 3.4%. A year and a half ago, it was 1.8.
Mhm.
And so debt upon debt, we're issuing debt to pay for the debt. So I just love your thoughts on what that.
Oh, I got taken on the woodshed by saying that we're to the point that we're actually printing money to pay for money we printed. And it's basically, that's the case.
It's true.
And I mean, even more of a ridiculous scenario is we're now actually printing money to give to other people, which is even more insane. And so here's my point on this is that I have to be careful because I think debt can be boring to viewers, and if you want to stay relevant, it's hard because the red mist comes down. If my mom doesn't like to hear about it, then I'd probably stay away from it. So I'd like to make it understandable, relatable to everybody out there. So if you put it in terms like, if you are an American that makes $100,000 a year, but you're $700,000 in debt, that's the U.S. economy. That's us. And on top of it, you're going to spend $40,000 a year until you can't see it anymore.
Right.
And so that is unsustainable and unmanageable. And there is going to be a breaking point where you're going to have to either pay for something, stop something, or you're going to have to inflate your way out. And arguably, it's going to be very hard. It's unelectable to go to Washington and say, I'm going to cut I'm going to cut spending and cut entitlements. It's just not an electable issue. So we'll have to do something up there. But at the end of the day, I think we're going to have inflation higher and harder than all of us.
You're right. And I think it's going to be. Did you hear though that Elon Musk said he can cut $2 trillion?
Yes, he did. But then I heard
At 35.
I heard Larry Summers come and give his rebuttal to that, which was a little nefarious. But look, we all have seen. I mean, how about this? I got a stat this morning. We did it on my show. Just the not entitlements, but okay, the what do they call them? Transfer payments have gone from 1970. There were 70 billion for the entire country. At 2021, right after we hit COVID, there were 6 trillion. Now we've come back down to 4.3 trillion in a normal environment now. So let's just take out the COVID part. So we've gone from 70 billion in 54 years to 4.3 trillion. I don't know what to think of that because it's almost like some folks have given up. I'd rather blame a bad bag, or I don't know what's going on. But we have so many things out there that, like the universal basic income that Andrew Yang wanted to get through. Mm-hmm. I wanted to mix finance with people's psyche because there's something going on where we don't have the tenaciousness where people think I can pull myself out of this mess by my own bootstraps. Right. Because there seems to be to them a lot of things in the way, which arguably there probably are. And so when you have your transfer payments go from 70 billion to 4.3 trillion in 2024 from 1970. You've got what we've seen happening with our debt and our debt interest. And this year alone, we've gone through 34 trillion mark for total debt, 35 trillion already, and we're going to go through 36 before the end of the year.
And the interest is 860 billion a year, and it's soon going to be $1 trillion.
No, it's already over a trillion. It's 1.1 something now. It's our second biggest balance. Behind Social Security, it's our next biggest line.
Yeah, crazy.
And so, I mean, when I talk about it on my show, it's have to be careful because it can be boring to some people. But when you tell them that the ramifications are such that you're going to be paying $25 for bananas if this doesn't stop, we have to. It's going to be bananas. And so, my point of view is, it seems as though we're going to have to live with inflation longer than we'd like, and they're going to have a very difficult job of managing the inflation and staying dovish to be able to inflate their way out of this problem and pay back those strong dollars we're borrowing today with cheaper dollars later, period. So arguably, I call that a structural default. We're not going to stop paying our bonds. We're just going to give you back dollars that aren't worth
as much. Yeah.
You wonder why blockchain's doing so well.
Yeah.
Sorry, Bitcoin and all that. Yeah. It's interesting is that it's not just here. It's everywhere.
Right, and so all these Western governments that copied us over COVID, and the amount of money that we spent. I also get vilified for saying this in public. We're not going to have another pandemic in this country
because we can't afford it.
Bingo.
Yeah.
It's all about the money. We can't shut this economy down ever again. I mean, and so when people, they think that you're a murderer when you say that, but I'm not. It's just common sense because we arguably didn't have the money. Well, we didn't have the money,
and we shouldn't have shut it down.
Right, and I got a lot of kudos on Fox because I went out to Arizona. I skated out there because I could get in my own pool. It was going to be shut down. And I did the math every single day with what we were given from even CNN or, and as it happens, if you did percentages from the 1918 Spanish flu or whatever it was called to what we were going through with COVID, as a percentage of the U.S. population, more people died in 1918 than we had dying in 2021.
Yeah.
But we never shut the economy down back then.
Right.
And so we just muddled through because how many restaurants in Washington, D.C. had George Washington eat them now? Because it stayed open the whole time. Right. We've ruined a lot of streets of restaurants that have been open for 300 years, 200 years, whatever.
Now they're gone. 21 Club.
Yeah, exactly right. And so there's a oh, sorry.
No, that's Arthur.
That's me.
Ignore that, everyone.
Okay. That's my pacemaker. But
it's that cloud exploding.
So there's so many things that are psychological versus also the fiscal part of it that I think are really playing into things nowadays. And I mean, I was brought up to trust the government BLS numbers or trust all the things that come out of the government. Now I've never been more
skeptical.
Yeah, because one of the best lines that was ever said to me on my show is I hope I'm alive in 25 years so that I know what was really going on today. Which I think is a great line.
I think we should clarify for the people that are listening. So the BLS numbers are the non-farm payroll numbers, and that's the number of jobs that have been created by the economy and or politicians who take credit for it from time to time as well. They were revised down 70,000 a month from March of this year to March of 2022. What year is it?
March 23 to April.
So 12 months.
Yeah.
From 2023 to 2024.
Yeah.
So 70,000 a month.
That's not just a rounding error. That's a big mistake. And that's really what Scott's referring to. Now, the good news in all of that is if you had fewer jobs, the productivity that we're experiencing is actually better than the numbers report. But his point is, if they can't, well, I don't know, I won't say what your point is, but if they can't calculate those numbers correctly, or even close to correctly, because they're revised every month as well. So this was a big fork snaggle, as we used to say.
And it hasn't happened before. So it's not like the economists all of a sudden got worse to BLS.
Well, I would argue that we're just doing a really bad job of cheating. because we're creating $3 of debt to buy $1 of GDP. I mean, that's horrible.
Yeah. That's a bad trick.
And also, by the way, we've kept ourselves out of a technical recession by flooding the market with government money, buying jobs, whatever we do. But we bought 818,000 that weren't really even there.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it that way. We paid for 818,000 jobs that we didn't get.
Yeah.
So we can't even manage that right. And so, we'll get through it. I'm not bearish of America, but whomever is president on January 1st is going to have a big plate of what to get through. I mean, it's going to be difficult because they've kept this thing together with duct tape and Band-Aids.
Yeah, and they just
we need a Paul Volcker in the presidency is what we need.
Yeah, instead of
someone who's going to do the hard work that makes them very unpopular.
Don't you think it's like, because again, this is that artist side coming out, but when you've got somebody that lets inflation run too long because it's supposed to be transitory, and it spikes to 9.1%, So he's made a mistake. And his answer to his mistake is to let unemployment run up to 5% to reset labor so he can get out of his mistake.
Right.
So to get out of his mistake, he's got to let 2.5 million people lose their jobs.
Yeah.
I think that's
Terrible.
criminal.
I do too. And there's no humility. I don't know if you remember, but at Jackson Hole, he said, I see some of my fellow shipmates from the good ship transitory. I mean, it's not funny,
No.
and most people, like if you think about, inflation's only up 21% cumulatively only, but food is up 35-ish and energy is up 26 or something. I mean, I'm close. I'm not exactly right on those numbers, but the average person, and by the way, the Fed looks at inflation ex food and energy. So they're not calculating in food and energy. What does the average family spend most of their money on?
Bloomberg actually had a really good article about how, the basket. So, they reweight this basket now. I think it's every year. Okay. But the thing is, it doesn't include a lot of things that Americans think of that are inflation, like property taxes, sales taxes, income taxes, that basically reduce the person.
Another big one's insurance.
Insurance. I was just going to say the same
Well,
thing.
here in Florida, now, like, serious.
Home insurance, car insurance, those are in, and
Double-digit increases.
yeah. So so there should be a CPI of the things you touch every day.
Right.
Yeah.
But there isn't.
Because that's over 40%. And because I had somebody write in my show today saying, you keep talking about the government's 21%, inflation number, and that just incenses people because she says, I live in Tempe, it's easily 50%.
Yeah.
And there's no way $100 in 2021 is going to be only $121 at the grocery store this year. There's no way.
I know.
You're exactly right. It's going to be more like 175 probably. But so and the only way to get those things to come down, and another thing I don't like that you can watch those Sunday news programs, is if inflation's coming down, that means prices are going up slower.
Less fast.
Yeah, only on Wall Street. Inflation's coming down when it's still going up. It's just slowing how fast
Right.
it's going up. It's terrible.
But people don't understand that. So that's why they don't feel better.
Right.
When the government's been telling them inflation's coming down, they should be feeling better. No, I'm just paying a little bit more for the bread, not as much as I was before.
Yeah, instead of a lot more.
Right.
Yeah.
And
that's
makes
not the
fun of me.
favorite.
I keep telling her I want to raise chickens. Actually, chickens are really cool. I love chickens.
No, you get your own eggs too. That might be a good idea. But
I had a friend who had chickens and they got in the house and they're not cool when they're in the house.
Okay.
So did the cow,
Don't live in the house.
the baby cat.
Like kids, don't live in the house.
our next door neighbor's got some. When we have the grandkids over, they love it because the chickens come over and they can run around. It's pretty fun to play with. But when I grew up with our farm, and it's not what they do to them to put, it's not a pretty sight. So it's not, you don't want the kids to see that part.
Yeah.
Um,
All right.
But I will
Well,
tell you that one of the things, actually, since your family's a dairy farmer, one of the best ways to make yogurt is actually with raw milk. 9% milk fat.
I know.
It's awesome. Yeah.
here we go.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. We're going to go to a break and I hope you can just stick around.
I will, absolutely.
Yeah. We're going to talk about the election because I think it's on everyone's mind. So give us a few minutes and we'll be right back.
Thank you.
Live from Nashville. Okay, so we're back and we're going to be talking about the election. You're going to hear a lot of people say that the bond market is bonds prices are going down and the yields are rising because expecting a Trump administration. Stocks are rising and we've heard some of the big investors on Wall Street say it's because there's going to be a Republican sweep. I'm just going to say I don't think anybody knows. But that's my opinion, and I hope you guys disagree with me. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to throw up a chart again with some of the poll numbers. But what are you seeing and hearing in your neck of the woods, which is here, live from Nashville?
I think Trump polls horribly. He always has done, and I think that it's a shock in the New York Times poll. He's neck and neck. I don't care about I don't care about the national poll. I just care about the swing state polls. But I think that the bond market, I think the equity markets are all pricing in that he's going to win. I mean, it's undeniable. And then on top of the fact that you've got that, I think that if he is, because he polls so poorly, within 4 points of anything, that's very positive for him. And these new markets, these poly markets where you can bet as much money, like you're saying, it's just insane. And the edge there is overwhelming. I mean, I don't know if you've seen it, but
I have. But here, I heard somebody say this morning that the polls overcorrected for Trump's underpolling, and so she thinks they're overstating. I heard this on another network this morning. She thinks they're overstating Trump. What do you guys think about that?
I mean, I wouldn't expect her to say anything else.
Yeah.
She would go, you know what, they're all right. I should probably leave. But I think, I talked about you.
No, I mean, I guess the thing that concerns me, at least about Kamala Harris, would be that she's out raising it 4-1. The last time I looked at the numbers, she had like 97 million. He had like 19 or 17 million. I can't remember the exact numbers. But if you're raising that much money, more than your candidate, you're spending it. I mean, the airwaves are just blanketed. If you're in a battleground straight, you really are an unhappy person because you're getting crushed with ads.
It's awful.
In Arizona, yeah.
All day long. And they just keep running the same ones. And they're not even credible ads. That's the sad part, I think. There's probably 5 to 6 Harris Waltz ads to Trump fans, to one.
Really?
Yeah. I'm in Arizona right now. I'm driving up to Nevada to vote because that's where I actually live. But if signs mean anything, they're all over the place in Arizona, the Trump signs. And
I see red. And so I've been looking at polls my whole life. I mean, my family's firm, Laffer Associates, we did conferences in DC. Nancy, that's where you and I met. Actually, been at a California conference. I've known Nancy.
Now he's going to talk about how much older I am than him.
Yeah, yes, I'm doing that. But you look at these polls, and you have to know which poll to look at. But more importantly, you have to look at the trend. You don't look at the average of the trends, and the trends are everything's moving red. I mean, everything's moving red, which it's not normal. I mean, at least not in a normal election, and it juxtaposes very different than his second election.
Do you think people get a little bit worried about getting too excited about it if that's the way they lean because of what happened in 2020?
Mm-hmm.
Because in 2020, your visual senses said, "Oh my gosh, this guy's it's a landslide." I mean, he's getting, tens of thousands of people
at the rally.
Yeah, to Biden's 25 people, and
Mm-hmm.
it was not even close.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the middle of the night, they stopped counting. So. I don't know. I think people are hedging their bets a little bit that way, but when it comes to the markets, I mean, that's a good question to ask. I mean, do you think it's better for Trump to be in office or Harris?
Well,
what's better for the market?
It's funny because last time what you heard was that when Trump got elected, and I think the Republicans sweep, what you heard was that financials and energy were going to be the best performing sectors, and technology was going to suffer. And it was exactly the opposite. And so I think what I'm concerned about is the Tax Cut Jobs Act sunsets at the end of next year. And what we've seen is tremendous investments in technology, which have been great for not just margin improvement at companies, but for the country. And full expensing is going to be down to 20% in 2026. So that means how much the companies can deduct when they invest for the future growth of their company. So I hope that we see, no matter who gets elected, that we see some nod to corporate taxes, because with the Tax Cut Jobs Act, and there was this man named Arthur Laffer who developed the Laffer curve, but with the TCJA, when they cut tax rates, corporate receipts went from 200 billion to 400 billion. And so instead of what we hear in the ads in Arizona, that corporations aren't paying their fair share, they're paying double what they were paying before that. So that's my take. I think it'd be better for stocks and for corporations and for individuals if we saw less regulation, lower taxes.
Plus, you don't tax your way into prosperity.
No, you don't.
Yeah, and that is really a big juxtaposition between these two candidates. One's much more regulatory and much more oriented around tax increases, and they try to. The narrative is that they're just going to tax the really super rich. I'm telling you right now, super rich, they don't pay their taxes because they can move their incomes, whereas the little people, the working people can't. And so typically if you want revenues, you got to tax the middle class. That's the only way you can get it.
And not a lot of people talk about growth. You know,
Right.
That's another thing that we always forget about. That Larry Kudlow talks about it all the time. Nobody talks about growth. And so I'd like to see that tax cuts and growth at the same time, and we have to stop spending. I mean, that's another thing that's really hindering.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I also think that, again, I'll throw a little curveball here, which has been bothering me for the last 4 years, is that I don't like the fact that we seem to have these managed outcomes that go against Mother Nature all the time. Like they know what they want, and so they make sure that everything behind it adds up to what they want when they finally get there. And at some point in time, we're going to have to pay the piper. We can't keep manufacturing an outcome that we want without having Mother Nature slowly but surely at some time take over.
Right.
And I think we're going to get this boomerang effect of these markets. And maybe they're just waiting. If it's not them, the next guy gets blamed for it. But I don't like the fact that we seem to be trying to control Mother Nature and manage outcomes when we just let the free market go and see what happens.
Exactly.
And I would say that the biggest problem with that has been the Fed.
Yeah.
Let the market, because I was an athlete. I know it doesn't look like it, but you break your muscles down to build them up stronger. You're allowed to break the market down and have it come back stronger.
And it's good for it.
Right, but
Yeah.
you don't let the market break itself down.
Right. And you just keep the
accommodating.
punch bowl.
If you just look at a chart going back, to 2000, you can clearly see from 2008, 2009 when the Fed said, we're basically not letting this market go down anymore. And we're not going to let this market then get healthy anymore. And when do they let it get healthy? When so many people now are in this trade, how do you get out?
Yeah, there was a great. We'll end on this, I think, but there was a great article that talked about the Wilshire. Did you see this? The Wilshire 5000 is now worth more than it ever was, but there's only 3,300 names in the Wilshire 5000 index. So there's fewer and fewer companies, but they're worth a hell of a lot more. And then there was another headline. It's not related, but it blew my mind. It said, when the market goes down, antidepressant prescriptions go up. And I think that too is problematic because investors shouldn't be looking at it every minute.
No.
And they should be, the farmers don't, right?
No, they
don't look
can't.
at farmers,
But it's
right?
the problem though, because the CNBCs, the Foxes of the world, of which I've been on all of them, they don't really like you to come back on unless you're going to pump the market up because they have almost a one-on-one relationship with the market and their viewership.
Yeah, he's right. Yeah. Well, it's so fun to be with you in Nashville.
I appreciate it. Yeah,
Thank you so much.
fantastic. Thank you for having me.
And thanks so much for joining us, everyone. We'll be back next Monday, same time. This next Monday will be on time. So 5 o'clock Eastern, wherever your zone is, and we'll be coming back with some interesting topics for you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Scott.